For most of my life, I was told a kinder, gentler version of Native American history. Noble chiefs, peaceful tribes, living in harmony with nature, until greedy Europeans came along and destroyed it all. That's what schools taught us. That's what Hollywood showed us. It even made us feel good just for feeling bad about it. At first glance, it makes perfect sense. Native Americans once ruled North America. They were here first, and now they're largely gone, confined to reservations, struggling with endless challenges. They're not a visible part of modern America, and that, by definition, seems like genocide. But as I started digging deeper into the real history of North American warfare, that simple good guys versus bad guys story fell apart. Scalping, torture, and massacres of villages were common long before Europeans arrived. It was a violent world. That doesn't make European settlers heroes. It just means the frontier was a collision between two brutal systems, creating a cycle of massacres and revenge that lasted for centuries. No one came out clean. This isn't about making anyone a villain or a victim. It's about understanding reality, even when it's awkward. Let's start with pre-Columbian America, before Columbus ever set foot on this continent. By our modern standards, it was shockingly brutal. We were taught that native life was about buffalo hunts and corn harvests, maybe the occasional border dispute, but for many tribes, violence was the rule, not the exception. Young men proved themselves through raids and warfare. You didn't become a man by planting crops. You earned your place by joining a raiding party and taking scalps. That was your resume. It earned you respect, a white kiss, and a name. Violence wasn't a last resort. It was a social currency. Raids happened constantly, sometimes weekly during the raiding season. Captives could be adopted, enslaved, tortured, in public ceremonies that would turn anyone's stomach today. Some were burned alive. Others had their fingers cut off or were forced to run gauntlets where entire villages beat them. To them, these weren't acts of savagery, but rituals, tests of courage and endurance, both for the captive and the tribe. Scalping, for instance, long predated Europeans. It was a symbol of victory and honor, used in dances and spiritual ceremonies. A scalp wasn't just proof of a kill, it was a trophy. Tribes like the Iroquois and Comanche built their reputations on warfare and expansion. Entire tribes were wiped out or displaced during conflicts such as the Beaver Wars. The violence was vast, not isolated. Still, it's important to remember that while many tribes were warlike, others were peaceful and diplomatic at different times. When Europeans, Spain, and Britain arrived, they didn't walk into a paradise. They walked into a continent already at war, and by allying with different tribes and introducing new weapons, they poured gasoline on an already burning fire. European warfare had its own rules. Armies in uniform, declarations of war, battles between soldiers, not civilians. But those rules didn't apply on the frontier. Native warfare was fluid, unpredictable, and ruthless by European standards. Raids came without warning, often at dawn, and left no survivors. Settlers were horrified. Women and children were frequent targets. But from the native perspective, this was the natural order of war, the way honor and revenge worked. Even basic concepts like surrender or land ownership were foreign. Europeans believed you could own and fence land, pass it to your children. Natives saw land as a living thing, like the sea, something you used but didn't own. So, when settlers started dividing and claiming it, it felt absurd and offensive to tribal nations. Soon, both sides adapted. Settlers abandoned their European rules and formed fast-moving militias, the precursors to the Texas Rangers, who fought using native tactics. They tracked, ambushed, burned villages, and took scalps in return. Each massacre justified another, and the frontier became a never-ending cycle of vengeance. Among all the tribes, none embodied this brutal frontier warfare like the Comanche. At their peak, they controlled an empire the size of Texas, dominating the southern plains for over a century. They ruled through fear, demanding tribute, raiding deep into Mexico, and crippling entire settlements. Their mastery of the horse made them nearly unstoppable. Comanche warriors trained from childhood, riding and shooting with unmatched precision. They could hang from the side of a galloping horse, firing 20 arrows a minute while using the horse as a moving shield. No army in the world could match that, but their power came with cruelty. Raids often included massacres, torture, and slavery. Captives, especially women and children, were adopted or enslaved. One famous captive, Cynthia Ann Parker, was taken as a child and raised among the Comanche, eventually marrying a chief and giving birth to Quanah Parker, the tribe's last great leader. When she was rescued 24 years later, she didn't recognize her white relatives or want to return. Her life, language, and loyalty were with the Comanche. The U.S. Army struggled for decades to defeat them. Traditional tactics failed. Soldiers couldn't chase or catch them. It wasn't until repeating rifles, scorched earth tactics, and the mass slaughter of bison, nearly 30 million killed, that the Comanche finally fell. Starvation broke what bullets couldn't. Yet for more than a century, the Comanche were the undisputed lords of the plains. A true empire without walls. When we step back, it's clear there were no heroes and no villains. There was only survival. Both sides committed atrocities. Both sides broke treaties. The U.S. government alone violated more than 500 treaties with native nations. And while warfare killed thousands, the deadliest enemy wasn't a weapon, it was disease. Smallpox, measles, and influenza wiped out up to 90% of native populations. These outbreaks weren't planned. They were tragic consequences of two worlds colliding. The story of the American frontier isn't about noble victims or evil invaders. It's about two powerful, proud, and often brutal civilizations colliding until one had superior numbers and firepower. If you really want to respect Native Americans, don't turn them into myths or eternal victims. They were real people, strong, intelligent, and deeply human. The truth isn't clean, and history never is. The more you dig, the messier it gets.